with the latest on the corporate front, all the market trends, expert opinion, and sound business advice. It is your unique window into the business world, direct from the heart of China.
Hello and welcome to Biz Today. I'm Zhao Yang in Beijing. The Chinese and U.S. delegations say they have held candid, in-depth and constructive trade talks in Madrid. The two sides met in the capital of Spain for their consultation on trade and economic issues. Discussions on Sunday and Monday included issues related to TikTok. The two sides say the talks were guided by the important consensus reached by the two heads of state. Chinese Vice Premier He Lifeng reaffirmed China's determination to safeguard its legitimate rights and interests. He also vowed to protect the interests of Chinese-funded enterprises overseas. Both sides have reached a framework consensus on resolving issues related to TikTok through cooperation, reducing investment barriers, and promoting relevant economic and trade cooperation. International Trade Representative Li Chenggang stressed China's determination in protecting the legitimate interests of Chinese companies.
China has always been against the politicization, instrumentalization and weaponization of technology, trade and economic issues, and will never seek any agreement at the expense of principles, the interests of the companies, and international fairness and justice.
So for more on this, join us on the line now are Dr. Zhou Mi, Senior Research Fellow with the Chinese Academy of International Trade and Economic Cooperation, Professor Qu Qiang from Minzu University of China, and also Yan Liang, Professor of Economics, Willamette University. So, Dr. Zhou Mi, I will start with you. Officials describe the discussion as candid, in-depth, and constructive. So, what does this wording tell us about the tone of this round of negotiations?
In my understanding, a lot of expectations from the markets. Can we do more on the details, and can we achieve some kind of a real consensus based on so many rounds of discussion? I think that we gave the answer. That is TikTok, because TikTok is one very important companies who are doing businesses and have relations with both countries of China and United States. And it is also a kind of companies who have a lot of impacts in the United States. And also, as the first term of Donald Trump, he proposed that TikTok should be forbidden if it cannot be sold to the United States companies. So there are a lot of concerns about the existence or kind of status. Can we reach a consensus on this company? Well, it's just an example, but I think that it has given us one very possible ways for dealing with a situation like the company of TikTok. But it is still very special. So when we're talking about the results of this round of negotiation, I think that there are still two more areas that both sides have some kind of progress. The first one is that something to do with the investment issues, like the restrictions or kind of practices or policies to do with cross-border investment. I think it's not only from one direction, maybe two directions. We are to discuss about what we can do to have more kind of a release on about the worries of the market on the investment issues. And the second is that we also noticed that we have talked about a lot of more areas, as maybe some of the people may think that this round is only focused on TikTok, but it's far from that, because the trade issue is one of the reasons why we started this negotiation between these two countries. So I think that the results has still need to be confirmed. That I think that has given the market more confidence that both countries can deal with some maybe very challenging and very difficult issues by the negotiation and talks.
And Professor Qu Qiang, so what's the progress made in this round of talks?
Well, I think the most important progress they made in this talk is that they achieved some framework consensus. I think it probably will contain lots of very important elements. Number one is about the data entrustment. And secondly is about authorization of the algorithms and also the IPR. And thirdly is about the control of the export, because the Chinese government really been talking to America that we should not allow this kind of weaponization of all kinds of export, tools, so that both sides need to really talk to each other without hurting each other's, core benefit. Everybody need to respect each other on equal footing. And I think American side has been, understanding that and also try to put this kind of the principles into the framework of all this kind of talk, and also the management of the whole issues, and not only the tariff but also Chinese companies, American companies. So I think this is, if we can really reach the final deal, I think this will be most important principles and spirit, not only for this case but also for the future.
Mm. And so, yeah, so on Chinese side, officials noted that China will approve technology exports and IP licensing in line with the Chinese law while respecting companies' autonomy. So what do you make of this statement?
Well, I think China's stance is very clear that China is willing to work with the United States when it comes to, the framework consensus. China pretty much said that, the stance is that we will cooperate on resolving these TikTok issues and also reduce trade investment barriers and also seek more cooperations on trade and commerce. That being said, I think when it comes to proprietary technologies like the content recommendation algorithms, that is really, I think, really the sort of the ingredient, right, for TikTok's success, right? It has a huge market in the United States, 170 million users, which makes it a very successful company. So I think for these kinds of technologies, China has the right, the company has the right to defend the kind of technologies. And from what I understand, as of now, the United States have been talking about there's a possibility for licensing the user right of these algorithm technologies. So China will keep the control, or other ways to say it is ByteDance will have the control and ownership of these algorithm and other proprietary technologies. I think, again, from China's perspective, the spokesperson from the Commerce has made it very clearly that China is willing to work on trade, investment, commerce, and many of the other, sort of the businesses. But China will oppose politicizing, instrumentalizing, and weaponizing, trade and commerce and technology. So this is just to say, yes, we'll go through the legal means, we'll go through the normal channel of business making, but China will oppose any politicizing of this kinds of technological transfer or business deals.
And Dr. Zhou Mi, so China stressed that it will not reach any deal at the expense of principles or company interests. So how do you think China is going to make sure the core interests of ByteDance will be protected?
Well, I think that there may be two layers of issues. The first one is whether the practices of enterprises can abide by the rules and the laws of the Chinese government. I think that is a really important thing because, no multilateral companies want to break the laws or trying to offend the laws of even a single country. So the ByteDance, they are really are operating cross-borderly and in different countries. So I think that they have to understand that administration, especially the government, they can give some kind of green light to the practices of either buying or selling some of the assets or some kind of their operations to other countries or cooperate with other partners. So they have to meet this requirement. But for this new area, I mean, in the digital economy, there are so many untouched fields for the government to deal with. So we need to make it clear on the procedures, on the requirements, and also on the necessary files they have to provide, and also based on the contracts. So the second level, I would say, is about the commercial operations themselves, because the companies can just make their own decisions. None of the governments can just interfere with the business operation because they are really the persons who are dealing with these issues. So for the companies, they have to find our reasonable prices of a cooperation, or they will find a suitable or comfortable way of doing the businesses. So there are a lot of issues or rooms to discuss between the administrative levels and the commercial levels. I mean, the Chinese government cannot just do that by ourselves. So we have a very important intentions to protect the company's interest, but we have to deal with the other government of the host country. So based on this kind of consensus, I think that we can still move on to make it more clear about what are the red lines for kind of commercial practices and how can we make the investment more sustainable. So the plans or the kind of future actions should be considered about these two levels. And I think that they have built up a very important channels for the governments and the enterprises to discuss about the details.
And Professor Qu Qiang, so shifting to a broader picture, the U.S. recently added 23 Chinese entities to its export control list. So what do you think are the real motivation behind the U.S. decision to add the Chinese entities in sectors like semiconductors and biotechnology? And do you think it's an overextension of national security concepts?
Well, I think in the short term, their motivation is just to have more of the cards to play on the bargain table when they're trying to meet their Chinese counterpart. With the 23 companies in their annual list, they think they probably will have some forehand, to bargain with Chinese officials over tariffs, over the TikToks, over many of the issues. But I don't think Chinese, counterparts will actually buy that kind of, excuse, because I think Chinese government has already made it very clear if we want to talk about it, we will talk about it. If we want to blackmail, on China, and we will never buy it. So I think this kind of attitude is really straightforward. And I think in the longer run, I think they also want to do this. It's not only for the short term. It's because they want to have this kind of, the blockade of the strategy and also for the technology. Competing with China in the semiconductor and biopharmaceutical areas is always the strategy of America because they understand this is the future technology and a leading in the whole world, and any one country who master this technology and have this, the commanding height will become the leader of the next generation. And also, this is very important businesses. If any country and a company will master this technology equipment, they probably will dominate the whole area, and they will have massive income and benefit to come with that. And also in the geopolitical area, I think any one country who master this kind of technology, like the semiconductors, AI, will probably become very important in the geopolitical, gaming. So yes, I think they will try to weaponize the whole area and use this, all this kind of the policies to blockade China and also try to, achieve their own advantages in this area.
And Dr. Zhou Mi, so what impact do these new U.S. restrictions have in practice? And could they actually accelerate China's drive for self-reliance in advanced technologies?
Well, from the short term, I think this definitely will have some impacts on Chinese companies' abilities to have the products from United States. I think that is also, increase the difficulties for the U.S. providers to find an alternative market because China is a super large market and it's a very stable market. So in the short term, it definitely will distort the supply and the demand relations in those kind of new and high technology. But as you mentioned, that in the longer term, I would say that Chinese company will never stop to wait for everything to return to its original status. So they have already started to do some kind of research and also trying to find out the better solution. I think that is very clearly, if you are looking at a semiconductor as one example, that Chinese companies are really achieving so many achievements just in the very few years. I think that no country, in the other, other areas have ever done that before. So based on the collaboration and the movements in the same direction, I think many Chinese companies are really able to find out some alternative ways of doing the businesses. So in the longer term, I mean, that is a kind of a real picture that we can foresee, that Chinese companies are really trying to establish their own ideas about how can we deal with the same issues in a more practical way and a more affordable way. And that kind of idea cannot just be limited in Chinese domestic market. We have so many trading partners. I think that can always be used and borrowed to other markets that is providing our even bigger market for the technology. So the competition will become a little bit different. The balance will change in this regard.
Well, we're speaking with Dr. Zhou Mi, Senior Research Fellow with the Chinese Academy of International Trade and Economic Cooperation, Professor Qu Qiang from Minzu University of China, and also Yan Liang, Professor of Economics, Willamette University. And after a short break, we'll continue to take a look at China's economy among external uncertainties. Stay with us.
Welcome. I'm Elaf Elad, economics professor and member of the Data Science and AI Center at New York University, Shanghai. On the World Today program, you can find in-depth and impartial insight, as well as critical commentary on key trends in the Chinese economy, financial technology, business, and blockchain. To prepare for the world tomorrow, join me on World Today.
You're listening to Biz Today. I'm Zhao Yang in Beijing. China has unveiled a new policy package this week aimed at boosting service consumption. That is part of the government's broader efforts to stimulate domestic demand and sustain economic growth. The new measures include cultivating tourism and sports experiences to boost spending by foreign tourists. Policymakers are urging sports authorities and local governments to support professional league games. So, Professor Qu Qiang, what is the main motivation behind China's new push to expand the service consumption?
Well, I think the core reason is that the shift of the economic structures. Well, China is really about to cross the threshold of what we call the middle income country to the higher income country. The economic structure. For example, according to the United Nations definition, which is $13,000 GDP per capita. And China is really just one step away from that threshold. If China are trying to cross that, I think one of the most important restructuring in the economy is that service sectors will be more than 50% in the GDP share. Everybody knows that China is a very large country for the manufacturing and is world factory. But this kind of the economic growth model cannot sustain higher quality of jobs and also higher quality of consumptions and higher income. So if China really want to, cross that border, cross that threshold, most important thing is that to make the traditional economy based on the infrastructure, manufacturing, housing market, try to be diverted into the service sectors, tourism, education, healthcare, and this kind of the new growth point. And also, I think the geopolitical, pressures recently has been everywhere. International trade has been deteriorating, and also the international demand has also been slowing down. All kinds of the tariff barriers, not only happening with America, but in many other countries. So I think domestic demand has to be very important replacement for the international demand. So I think consumption area is going to be the very important sector in the domestic market. And also I think if every Chinese people want to improve their living standard, want to have a higher income, I think service sectors will have a very strong attractions for the young people for higher income jobs. Like tourism sectors, like the catering sectors, like the education and healthcare. This will last for a very long time and also will accommodate to the human resources with higher education. And also, I think last but not least is for the expectation, because with all this kind of the domestic demand to be improved and service sectors to be improved, well, I think people's confidence for the future consumptions will be rebuilt. So people would have more of the confidence to spend their money because they will have a higher income, and then I think the whole economic cycle will be revitalized. So I think that this is the longer term vision for the Chinese government.
So yeah, the service consumption is positioned as the next key economic driver. So what's the potential of it, and how big is the market here in China?
Well, I think I agree with Professor Chu Qiang. I think consumption demand, especially service consumption demand, has huge room to develop in China. So it's a very important element or component for the domestic demand. But on the other hand, I think service consumption itself is really tied to people's livelihoods improvements. So I think that's what the spokesperson from the Vice Minister of Commerce has talked about that, boosting consumption, especially service consumption, is not only boosting the economic growth, but really tied to the improvements of people's living standards. So going back to your question, I do think that there is a huge potential because when you look at other countries, service consumption typically account for 70% or even higher for the total consumption. But in China, it's about 50%. So there's a huge room to improve, especially when you look at the sectors like entertainment, sports, elderly care, childcare, education, tourism. All these, I think, still have a lot of room to grow. Take the tourism as example. 2024, we have seen both domestic and international tourism spending reached $1.68 trillion that helped contribute to the Chinese economy, and that is a 23% increase over 2023. So that just shows the trend as China grows richer, right? Bypassing that middle income gauge, there is more and more demand for consumption of services. And I think the added benefits is that once you provide some of the essential services, for example, elderly care, childcare, then you're also able to unleash some other consumption demands, right? Because people are less worried about saving for kids' education or saving for medical care, then they're much more willing to spend money on many other items, right? Goods or services. So I think all of this just to say that there are direct benefits when we provide more consumption stimulus, there will be more service consumption, but also by way of boosting, these service supplies, it would help to ease people's mind, improve their quality of life, and also allow them to spend more on discretionary items.
And Dr. Zhou Mi, so the latest economic figure shows that China's retail sales grew by 3.4% in August. So what does this tell us about China's consumer demand and the effectiveness of policies to boost the consumption? And do you think consumption can stabilize China's economy among the ongoing global trade tensions, particularly with the U.S.?
Well, we know that consumption has been our very important pillars and also a kind of target for Chinese government to pursue, especially in the recent several years. I think that at least from last year, we noticed that the consumption policies has been strengthened by more efforts by the central government and also the local government. I think that these figures show that China's consumption is still very resilient compared with several months ago. Maybe it's not as high as before, but I still believe that is still very stable because we have to deal with sustainability of the consumption. I think that especially when we are facing some challenges from the external factors, the domestic market should be paid more attention. This kind of improvement of the consumption is not just trying to persuade the people to buy more things. Actually, it's creating a better ecosystem for people to using these products more wisely. Like Yan has mentioned about there are some complementary benefits for consuming the goods and consuming the services. Actually, they are able to improve the other side of abilities. So with more policies, that is kind of practices by Chinese government. We want to address the problems of short of supply, but also we need to care about how can we improve the consumption demand side. So the relation between these two sides are improving, and I believe that people can benefit from having more choices by when we are able to import more things and create a better connections among the different markets and trying to give the people more choices. That is really important.
And Professor Chu Qiang, so how would you characterize China's overall economic performance so far this year? And what do you think are the key drivers for the rest of the year?
Well, I think China's in a very sure path of the restructuring its economy. Shifting gear is never easy job, but China has been doing very good so far. Just take a look at the service sector and its growth. China has been wanting to do this for a very long time to shift its, weight of the economy to the service sector, to domestic demand and the consumption. And ever since the beginning of the last year, we've been seeing that the consumption area has been always developing faster than the manufacturing area. If you take a look at the CPI and the PPI, you will find out that the service sectors are growing very fast. And in some of the certain months, it's been even growing at the double digit. So I think the national strategy has already been realized. But also, I think manufacturing sector is still maintaining its vitality. For example, if I take a look at the export, Chinese export, especially the trade surplus, are also growing very steadily, especially among this very turbulent international backdrop. I think it's never an easy job to do. And also, I think if you take a look at the overall other performances, like the job ratio, the domestic consumptions, and I think overall, I think the performances is very stable and are doing pretty well. I think the only concern we have here is about the housing market, rebalance the housing market. Some other areas, for example, like the local debt, even though a lot of people are saying it's going to be a problem, but I think according to the package of the central bank and also central government, I think the local government debt has been resolved pretty properly. So if we can rebalance the housing market, I think the Chinese economy is going to regain its momentum very fast in the next year.
Well, we're speaking with Professor Qu Qiang from Minzu University of China, Dr. Zhou Mi, Senior Research Fellow with the Chinese Academy of International Trade and Economic Cooperation, and also Yan Liang, Professor of Economics, Willamette University. And that's all the time for this edition of Biz Today. To listen to this episode again or to find more previous episodes, you can download our podcast by searching for Biz Today. I'm Zhao Yang in Beijing. Thank you so much for listening.